Thank you for tuning into the second episode of the 7A podcast. This is Ginger. Tonight, topics are online dating apps as well as BDSM and cinema. With that being said, would you all like to take it off from here?
Certainly. So let's go to our first topic online dating apps, and we can go segue into dating. Okay, Cupid, for instance, that's the one that I always used. I have not been using online apps for some time, but I did meet my fiance on OkCupid, and I really liked all the questions that it asked. And it was also free, which, unlike Match.com, which what do they charge? Like $15, $20 a month for the privilege of them matching you with someone?
Their
Mhm.
prices, I find, are a little steep for the service that they provide that is provided so freely for other apps. Granted that they're not as thorough.
So, luckily, today we have some guest speakers. We have Chuck, Clover, and Vitriol, all from the Sweet 7A server. Chuck, would you like to talk about your experience with mobile dating apps?
My experience is in Tinder, Bumble, and I think that's about it. Well, plenty of fish too. Tinder, I found to be just more so like a I want to have sex tonight kind of app. Bumble was Tinder in reverse, where a woman had to initiate the conversation if she liked you, but typically they said hey and then expected you to initiate the conversation anyways. And then Plenty of Fish was like a great value version of Tinder.
My goodness. Okay, so we have a couple of other guests that are typing in the podcast chat. Clover, would you like to talk to us about your experience with online dating apps?
Sure. Personally, my experience with online dating apps, I haven't used them in quite a while, and my extent of it really doesn't go far past, like Chuck said, Tinder and Bumble. I honestly found that I moved very far away from them because of the quality of people, and I actually mainly meet a lot of people online other ways that aren't through the typical dating services and apps.
All right, and our
You
third
know,
guest we have here is Vitriol. Could you tell us about your experience with online dating applications? You're a bit younger than the rest of us here.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think I would have to echo Clover there in that. I mean, I've used Tinder and Bumble as well. The people you meet with that are pretty give or take, depending on how you, I guess, present yourself on your own profile. I think a lot of it really is about, um, I guess, the intentions you sort of signal uh, in how you make your profile. But yeah, the quality of people you can meet is iffy. And I would think that both when it comes to potential like encounters or just meeting people in general, you do a better job with things like Discord, even. But the only advantage to these dating apps is just the proximity factor that you can immediately find people close to you. If quality is what you're looking for, I don't think you should be using those apps.
So, one of our active listeners, Lady Davidoff, Queen of the World, she said, to be honest, dating apps are really bad and there are a lot of scammers and liars. I would concur with that assessment. What do you think?
Um, yeah, there's a lot of scammers and liars, but it's kind of the field that you're playing with. It's granted it's going to be there because it's an easy pool of people to con, right? And it's a simple enough con that, it can be established within a matter of minutes. And you don't really have to get involved very much to be able to pull something off like that. So, yeah, there's quite a few scammers and liars, but you do tend to have some genuine people on there too. My experience with dating apps include apps like Plenty of Fish, OkCupid, Bumble, Tinder to a degree. Tinder was not clearly just not for me. It was a hookup app for all intents and purposes, and that was not my intent, so I got out of that quickly. But um, in Plenty of Fish, I found that the pool, pardon the pun, was just not big enough. And so I gravitate towards more OkCupid and Bumble. But yeah, I do agree with that assessment. However, it's just, in my opinion, it's just what happens when you have open apps like that.
Yeah, okay, so like with the social media apps, I kind of like well, Twitter and I don't know, other things where you can actually communicate how you are as a person, like what you believe in, and like on a day-to-day basis, kind of are better for online dating than actual online dating apps, which seems to be weird to me. But I found that you learn more about a person when they're like saying stuff every day about different topics and laughing and doing anything like the regular things that you do in a person to person interaction, more so than somebody posting just their profile and making you believe what they want you to believe at the initial onset.
I can definitely jump off of what Chuck was saying. It's definitely a lot of your social medias very well, and definitely more looks at finding people that are similar to you as well. Nobody can really ignore Discord. I mean, we have all these servers that have different interests built specifically for you, and you're able to connect with people that have those same exact interests. And I've honestly been able to connect more with people that may be a lot farther away from me, like Vitriol was saying, but the quality of people you find that have similar interests you can find on here a lot better versus, hey, we have people proximity, but none of these people are going to have my common interests.
Servers like Suite 7A and we are just allowed to be ourselves, and we get to interact with people on a daily basis, which clearly gives us a better perspective on who we are interacting with. And there's really no way you can fake being who you are every day. And if you are, I mean, you're doing a hell of a good job in conning somebody. That
I think for me too, like going off of that, the thing that always irritated me about things like Tinder and Bumble is that you have to sell yourself. Like it doesn't matter what you're looking for, but you have to sell yourself in this very cold and removed way where it's like you've got your pics, you've got the pics that you upload, whatever you've got written on your profile, and then the texting if you match. When interacting with someone, you have to at least have voice, in my opinion, to like really try to jive with them and even get a feel. Like even if you don't know them, if you've like never met them before or learned anything about them before, it's still, I think, infinitely better to be able to at least talk, if not like see and talk to them, to kind of just get a feel for things before you actually meet up in person.
Right. I think that I come from a different background in that I started off on OkCupid and like things like that, where you have a lot of sketchy meetups, and then I moved on to like now there are things like Grinder where it's a very specific demographic, and um, the profiles aren't always intricate. Like sometimes it's just a picture and like an age or weight, and like you say yes, I'm interested, or no. It has always been my understanding that like Grinder is not what I'm after, because like I want more of a personality thing, and so I go to Tinder. But if Tinder is also just another hookup app, like that's not what I'm after either. Like um and I've had good dates from Tinder, but I've also had like hookups from Tinder, and it's hard to tell what the app is meant for. So when people say it's just a hookup app, I realize maybe it's a mistake on my part. You know what I mean?
I mean, I've seen different people using, like, even as I go through people on Tinder, like, it seems like people are using it for both.
Mm-hmm.
I haven't really seen much of a consensus. Like, it's technically, or I guess effectively, a hookup app. And, like, I don't know, I don't know if this is kind of a platitude, but, like, I'll see people on there saying anything from I'm just looking for friends to I want to hook up to I want something serious to I just want a cuddle buddy to watch Netflix with, nothing more. It can be all over the map. So
Mm-hmm.
Let me just bring it back to the text real quick. So, Susie here said, I agree with Clover. Although distance may not be convenient, it is much easier, in my opinion, to connect with someone on a server, per se, where you both are in, based on common interest, like here on Suite 7A, versus on an application such as Tinder, where you walk into it blindsided based on 3 photos on the profile and at most a small paragraph that they lazily type out. I'm going to continue on top of that, Susie. Realistically, how honest are those people? That was the biggest problem
Well,
I had. They have a picture from when they were in high school, or a picture that's like outdated, or somebody else catfishing, God forbid. But even then, it's like they are trying to put forth the best possible version of themselves. And you, hopefully in good faith and trusting yourself, you're also putting out the best version of yourself, whether it's conscious or subconscious. So it's interesting to see how those like dream selves intersect, and then how grossly disappointed that date turns out to be.
for me, when I signed up for Tinder, I was like, okay, I'll put myself out there. Like, these are my photos. This is me. I think this way. Like, here's a blurb about me. Whatever. Then it was like, now it's like people are like, hey, is that blurb representative? Like, how well did you market yourself? Like, you have to think about all these different parameters that, what attracts people to respond to you. And I'm not used to marketing myself that way, because all I was trying to do was go on and be like, hey, here's me, prospective people that would be willing to have dinner. I'm not trying to market myself in the way where I make a brand of my name, It's a completely different perspective, I guess. It's weird the way that it's changing the way that we go about dating other people.
I can understand that. Thank you, Ginger. I
Mm-hmm.
completely understand what you're talking about. Just like that, the branding. I mean, a big part of what I do for the audio community is I have branding. So it's how I talk to my people, how the scripts that I choose, etc. So like the same thing with an online application like this. You are, putting out those photos, you're putting out, best self. And
Mm-hmm.
I think it's hard. You're having to take somebody on faith, and that can lead to some weird places. Let's see. Blue Lava just commented, I just feel like people don't take dating apps seriously. I've met one cool person online. Aw, Blue Lava, you haven't been here very long. Sweet 7A is a great place to meet people.
If people kind of treated it like it was real life,
Mm-hmm.
a real life interaction, I think that it might go smoother. But at the same time, people in bars might also take life the same way as they do Tinder, looking for a hookup for the night. So I don't know if it's too much different than in real life, to be honest with you.
But like in real life, it's like, I think you're attractive. I think you look like you're having fun. This seems like how I would have fun. Like, I'll be like, hey, and then we talk from there. But with Tinder, I feel it's like, yeah, you look fun, but like, what's your bio? Like, what is it? Like, you don't seem that interesting because you haven't sold yourself well. Why am I supposed to care about that? I don't know if I'm ready to judge you based on how you fill out how you describe yourself. Maybe you're a totally fun person. Maybe you love hiking. I'll go hiking with you. Like, I don't know. Like, this seems like a completely arbitrary way of dating.
I think we've kind of put a bow on that. Anyone else want to talk about their best date or worst date that they've had from one of these applications?
Yeah, so typical Tinder, you have people who have alternative motives. I know I was supposed to meet this one person at this event at my college campus that was going on. All I know is I spent the entirety of the hour and a half long event. I could see the dude. I could see he was making eye contact and looking at me, but dude would not walk across to say hello to me. So you know what? I just met someone else and I started dating someone else I met at the event because some poor dude from Tinder apparently wants to just look from afar instead of actually coming up to people and talking. And I feel like that also could be related back to the whole like, we didn't really have that much in common, but we had the proximity thing. But it was very interesting to just watch some dude be terrified for a straight hour and a half that they're okay with sitting there and staring you down from like 10 feet away, but they're too afraid to come like speak to you type of deal.
I can understand that. Maybe he was a voyeur. Maybe he enjoyed watching from the sidelines. I don't know. What about you, Chuck? Do you have any?
I actually have a few, yeah. So I had one with like a local teacher. I think this was Tinder, I'm pretty sure. Her pictures look nice. Her bio was pretty interesting. Her conversation was even good. But whenever we met up, her pictures were like, I don't know, 5 years before that. So like she had gained a little weight, which is not, I mean, it's not cancel all plans kind of thing, but I think that it was a little deceiving. Um, we met somewhere the first time to just talk, and then the second day, the next day after that, like she actually lived in my neighborhood. So I just walked over to her house, and like she wanted me to bring a bottle of wine. She had a bottle of wine. We drank wine. She cooked, and I was a little bit hesitant to eat her food because I don't know her like that. But I ate the food because she ate first. Um, we drank our own bottles of wine, and then she was like, we had been talking about if we would like touch each other or like kiss or anything, like if we met up. And she was like, yeah, like I'm all for it. And so like I got close to her, and she was like, no, 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 I'm not that kind of girl. I don't know like what you thought I was, but that's not it. And it made me laugh, but I was like one bottle of wine in, and so I was like, we had this long conversation about, what our expectations were, and they just didn't match up. So I never saw her again. The second one, we actually met up at a wine it was like a wine tasting kind of thing. They had live music, and we sat there and talked for a while. And she started asking me like personal questions, like right off the bat. Yeah, I'm not comfortable sharing that with you. So she got upset, and she like ended up leaving. It was kind of funny, but yeah, I met somebody else there while that day ended, so it turned out to be good. But that's pretty much it. They're all dead ends on my end. So
I'm going to bring it back in with the podcast text here. So, Cantankerous, her best date, met a bartender a year ago. Went on a date. He was gorgeous. And knowing her, that means hot, hot, hot. 28 years old, kind of looked like Kevin from Backstreet Boys. Taking it back. We went out for drinks. He started at this niche place downtown. Shared a flight of beers, tasted about 5 different types. Then as that place was closing by 10 p.m., we walked over to a decent restaurant, got dinner and a couple of margaritas. Ooh. Then as that place was closing down around midnight, we sauntered over to the pub for gin and tonics. Man, that's a full night. Finished the night with a kiss in front of one of the most historic hotels in my city. Apparently, the next week, we fucked each other's brains out. Nice one, Tank. What about you, Vitriol? Do you have a best, worst, or something funny that's happened from a dating app?
Honestly, not really. At least I could recount some experiences, but I don't. There's nothing I think that are particularly novel about them. The only thing I was going to say actually was kind of just to the previous points we were making about, how impersonal it is to trying to engage with people based off of like their pictures and texting with them. It's like how things go on Discord sometimes. What I do a lot is when I do feel like I'm having a decent conversation with a girl I match with on Tinder is I'll suggest that we like FaceTime or do some sort of like at least voice, if not like video, hang out and continue the conversation that way. And I don't know, I just like for me, like the times where I have actually gotten something out of it, we've done that, and I feel like it just helps you get a sense for who you're going to be seeing beforehand much better than if you just go straight from texting on Tinder to meeting up. Not only if for no other reason than you get to hear their voice, see how they behave, see what their abode looks like, and see what their face looks like when they're not trying to pose. That's my hot take anyway.
I guess I'll tell a funny story. So I met him on Match.com. Super nice guy. Was when I was living in Portland. He was handsome. He was funny. And he was very, very sweet. And he took me to a lovely diner, and we had a great dinner. Milkshake, burger, the works, was just classic diner food. And then afterwards, we went and saw a movie. So we went to the theater. I had no idea what was playing because I just hadn't even thought of it. And this was during the time that Mel Gibson's Passion of the Christ came out. So I just thought it was going to be a lovely Christian movie.
Passion of the Christ would just kill my passion, seriously.
I didn't know. I certainly wasn't expecting someone to be, what was it, flagellation? When they were beating
Yes.
him with that like steel-tipped whip? Jesus
Oof.
Christ.
Well, for some people that could have been a turn on, but
They were shredding his back, Vitriol. It literally just
some
like,
people are weird.
nope,
Whose choice was it to go and see that movie?
his.
Yeah, he was trying to do it in the movie theater, and you wanted to watch the movie. That's where the miscommunication
Yeah,
came in.
no, he wanted the mood to be set with that movie.
That was a bad choice.
That's the kind of movie that you go to see with someone to not watch the movie if that's what you were trying to do.
I don't want that in the background while I'm fucking someone. I'm sorry.
Whatever was playing in the theater that was a romantic comedy, I would have taken him home and smashed. No lie. I see
Yep.
some people typing in text chat here. So Susie says, as someone who grew up as a Christian, I've seen this film regarding Passion of the Christ various times, and gosh, my vagina would be drier than the Sahara Desert if his intention was for it to be a turn on.
Oh, that's disgusting, to be honest with you.
I would have to be in a relationship with someone for like at least 6 months before I'd even consider doing it without a condom.
Hey, what happens when you already have a STI going into it? Do you care?
You disclose that and have a
Yeah.
discussion like grown ass adult.
But I'm saying,
Yeah.
do you care about using protection if you already got something?
You
Yes.
could catch something else.
Or you can transmit it to someone else. I completely agree.
So Backseat Annihilator just posted. I went on a date a few years ago, and the guy kept begging me to hang out again. We met for dinner. We both got there, and he said he was going to move his car closer to the door because it was raining. He got in his car and left. I ended up walking home in heels.
Hey, he did it right. I like his tactic there. He didn't like you whenever he showed up, and he just ghosted you. Normally, the woman gets away with that, and we don't ever say anything. But I think he's a hero, and he might be my idol from now on.
So there are a couple of really great statistics that Danny has posted. 19. 1 in 5 committed relationships began online. I'm surprised it's that low still. 20% seems kind of low. And then 20, people who met their spouse online are more likely to say their marriage is satisfying.
I wonder why that is, though.
I think when you meet by happenstance or just in real life, the intersection of things that you're interested in is very limited. Whereas with an online dating application, if you're answering things like truthfully, then the more of your interests will line up and you can actually have a much more satisfying life. Let's see. Those who catfish often do so out of loneliness, boredom, or revenge. So explain to me why overweight, balding, fat men will catfish as young girls to young men. Any takers?
I honestly think it's probably for attention.
Pretending to be the opposite sex?
Women get a lot of the majority of attention online. Just it's quite obvious as as a girl that we definitely get a lot more attention than our male counterparts do, especially online. So I could definitely see someone who has zero, it just doesn't get any attention, and they're really seeking some sort of attention, whether it be from someone of their same sex or not. Or I've also seen a lot of these times these people are questioning their sexuality, and in order to have some sort of love from the sex that they're interested in. There have been cases where they do so and catfish as a woman just so they can have some guy show them attention. It's very confusing on why people catfish in the first place to me, but I don't understand it personally, but people do it.
Well, I mean, my guess, my armchair psychologist estimation of this would be that these people, they don't necessarily care what side of the fantasy they're on. They just want to see the fantasy unfolding. Um, I mean, I do think it's a mixture of the fact that they want that they want an encounter involving some idealized female and a kind of pursuant male. Clover was saying there's probably primarily a bi-curiosity or even homosexual and pedophilic often impetus behind what they do, in my opinion.
Looks like there's some statistics of percentage of online users in the US who have or know someone who has met a romantic partner on a dating website or application as of January of 2019 by age group. So looks like in ages 18 to 34, about 20%. Yes, they have met someone online. A little bit lower in the 35 to 54. In the 55 plus, it's know someone that has. It's pretty much across the board, about 30% in all age groups. No, have not known or do not know anyone that has. It's like 50% of 55 and older, and about a third, 33 or 36% for our age groups of 18 to 34 and 35 to 54. And prefer not to say. Only 1% for the 55 plus, and 5% for the 35 to 54, and 6% for 18 to 34. So I guess closed mouths, sink no ships. I guess the next logical question would be, what applications do you recommend, or online social media do you recommend to meet people?
It depends on your just because certain age groups use certain social media, seems like, well, at least to me anyways, just based on the people that are around me. The older folks typically use Facebook. At least my relatives have found people to date on Facebook. Twitter would be maybe my age group. I don't know, 25 and up, maybe younger than that. Not really sure about 18 to 25 demographic, but maybe they'll be on Twitter as well. But that's just my experience.
So Danny posted some really great statistics here based on gender, which applications are being used by who. So Match.com, eHarmony, Bumble. Bumble's that low. I'm kind of surprised. OkCupid's kind of gone by the wayside. Tinder. Coffee Meets Bagel. Has anyone heard of Coffee Meets Bagel? Is that a thing?
I have not. This is the first time.
We've got Hinge down,
Is that like an
Happen,
innuendo?
Plenty of Fish, which we've all heard of, Grinder, which we've all heard of, and religious-based dating app. That's a thing, and I'm kind of impressed.
I was just going to circle back to the conversation we had towards the beginning about you don't particularly have to use something that is particularly like specified for dating. You don't have to use Tinder. You don't have to use Match.com. You don't have to use things that are very like meant to be dating apps. You definitely can. I would recommend personally, as my type of deal is I would recommend more so things where you can express your interest and find like-minded people in a more casual setting. You have casual conversations with people, you get to become friends, you get to like know them a lot better, and then maybe romantic feelings evolve. I think it's a much more natural. You find people that are much more like you and have similar like feelings and interests, and I think it possibly could even be more successful than just using dating apps for the sake of using a dating app.
Well, according to this statistic, about 73% of men and 63% of women agree with you. Meet them in person, meet them in other ways.
Funny, the only successful story I actually have heard from Match.com in my life is actually one of my high school teachers. He met his wife on Match.com, and he told us that in class, and we all laughed at him. But his wife, his future wife, I guess, well, his wife now, but she moved from California all the way across the country to with her kids, her two kids, to marry him and live with his two kids. And I thought that that was like the ultimate success story. So that's like when I actually like thought it was possible in the first place.
And, like, the only thing I was going to say to what Clover was saying is again that I feel like if there is any likelihood of anything, especially if what you're looking for is an actual relationship, but even if it's just a hookup, I feel like just in general you get more like a better likelihood of good results when you're in an environment where you're not like shopping for each other basically, which is how these dating apps work. You're in an environment where you're not only interacting with each other, you see different people and how they interact with others. So you have like the full range of social interaction when you are engaging with them in a community setting rather than a matched up one-on-one situation.
So Rockefeller said a lovely comment to Vitriol. Bruh. Vitriol dropping truth.
That's all I do. Thanks for coming.
Well, does anyone else have anything else to say on this in regards to the dating applications? Any other funny stories or recommendations?
Well, I am going to say that I feel like a hypocrite because I'm saying all this while going through Tinder right now.
Go get you some Vitriol.
Yeah, Vitriol.
Yeah, it's going to be late as fuck night if I do. I think I'm just going to bail on it. Honestly, I'm too tired.
What app did you say you were using?
Tinder.
Hello,
How
Rockefeller.
we doing, boy?
About dating apps, yeah. Just kind of like I agree with what Vitriol said about it's a hard environment to be in when you're just shopping around for each other, which is essentially what it is, as Vitriol said. But I think a good way to kind of around that, in my personal experience, what I found is instead of, I don't know if this may already been said, I've only just jumped in, but uh, getting to meet up as soon as possible, because what I've found tends to happen is you talk for, like, let's say 3 or 4 days or even a week, and by the time you guys get up to meeting in person, like, you know everything. You know as much as you'd know talking in person, so there's no real conversation to be had, so the conversation can't flow naturally while you're engaging person to person. So what I found is if you can meet up as soon as possible, then a conversation can flow naturally and you can talk about all these things, because things will come to your head and you'll remember things and funny stories and embarrassing stories and all this stuff. And I found that it kind of works a bit better when you're meeting someone, like on Tinder or Hinge or Bumble or whatever it is.
Surprising though, Rockefeller, I've never experienced that issue.
Really? I
Yeah.
have. Maybe I'm just a boring person. Maybe I'm just really boring. I don't know.
I also have a knack for carrying conversation.
I can relate to what he's saying.
Yeah, and I mean, as well as when the longer you wait, the longer you have to build up this idealized image of what this person's gonna be and how well you're gonna connect with them when you meet. You're gonna be like, "Oh my God, it's gonna be love at first sight. We connect so well over messaging. I know so much about them already. I feel like we're soulmates and we're like good friends already." And then you meet them, and because you have nothing to talk about and you think they're going to be so amazing, they don't live up to your standards, and you're disappointed and you don't want to see them again.
That's very true.
Out of curiosity, Rockefeller, what apps are used primarily in Australia and New Zealand? Do you know?
Well, I know from my kind of like, I know like through high school and even in university and stuff, Tinder's pretty much the way to go. But a lot of people, I don't know how it is in the States and stuff, but a lot of people use Tinder as just like a joke. And then if something serious comes out of it, then it's like, yeah, good for you. But no one goes on there actually looking for people. It's more of just like a weird Facebook, I guess.
Next up, we have BDSM in cinema. I do believe Cantankerous had a lovely list of movies that are examples of this. Nymphomaniac 1, Nymphomaniac 2, Sleeping Beauty. There were a couple of others.
Yeah, Secretary. Oh, Eyes Wide Shut.
Oh, yeah, Eyes Wide Shut.
Personally, I've not seen any of these movies.
Okay, so you need to be introduced to Secretary first.
Or if you want a small comedic primer, Netflix's original series, I think it's called Bondage.
The movie that made stay-at-home zombie white wine moms.
Ooh, 9.5 weeks. That's the one I was forgetting.
Cucumbers nationwide. That's the one.
Danny, how dare you bring up that movie, Vitriol?
How can I not bring it up in this when we're talking about this subject? 50 Shades of Grey. Naturally.
Oh, goddamn.
Love
No.
me
50
like
Shades
you
of
do.
No,
Love,
more
love,
like.
love me like you.
Just as clarification, is that thing you talk about on Netflix, was that the show about the dominatrix and then the guy who
Yes.
One and the same,
Yes.
yeah.
Okay,
Yes.
I loved that show. I loved it.
All right, I'm going to talk about this briefly. So, those of you that are not aware of what true BDSM is, 50 Shades of Grey is your exact shape, form, type of pretend BDSM. Honestly, anyone who's in the know and knows what safe, sane, and consensual means knows that Mr. Grey was none of those things.
Mm-hmm.
He was kind of a manipulative sociopath.
Yes, very
Like,
much so.
Jesus Christ. But
Like,
the interesting thing about that is that it says, I don't know, I mean, I'm not trying to turn this into like a sociological thing, but 50 Shades of Grey got really, really, really popular, the book and the movie. And, there are other BDSM related forms of media in which they are perhaps a bit less pernicious. But, I think perhaps it's worth noting that, at least when we're trying to look at the media itself, women seem to go for that.
That I do own all 350 Shades movies, but this was also before I came to know the community and actually be a well-informed person on BDSM. So, in my defense.
All right. The thing that worries me, because what we were saying before is that 50 Shades is like your pretend BDSM. The thing that worries me is that that probably would have been like the introduction for a lot of people into BDSM. Like that would have been their exposure to it. And that worries me because like that is not a good image to have as the first time, like just being introduced to BDSM as like as a activity. I put in air quotes. Yeah, that worries me because that's a very bad depiction of it in my humble opinion, and that worries me for people wanting to get into BDSM.
Well, what I found interesting about it was the fact that like he pressures her to sign, and as also as a way to very clumsily exposit cliche BDSM stuff that they're going to be doing later. So, like, my point being that like there's some kind of like there's like a facsimile of consent there, but it's in the form of the most sociopathic in the most sociopathic form you can imagine, that being a contract, a written, signed contract. But again, as immoral as it is to our like rational or normative minds, to a certain extent, it seems that women seem to go for this kind of almost sociopathic. Uh, at least again, like in the framework of a fantasy, because like a book and a movie is fantasy, and I'm certain that all the women who really like 50 Shades of Grey would not actually like being with a guy like Christian Grey in
I see.
reality.
I got a completely different understanding of the systems from that framework. For me, I'm somebody that has been in that situation where I kind of like expect something from this that's beyond just talking to each other or meeting upon this platform where we expect the hookup to happen, but we want to justify it in our own way. Um, I definitely like. I went to Tinder because I felt like things like Grinder weren't enough, and it's just something to be said. Like, I want something more where we have a blurb about ourselves to kind of like justify why we're even talking. And I think, at least in my personal experience, I've had things happen where it's like Grinder, by all means, is something more to be said as like uh just meeting needs as a basic interest versus like actually having something to meet those needs upon. I don't know if this makes sense. I'm just saying, like, in my personal experience, Tinder has consistently been a little bit more forethought behind, but at the same time, like, I hear about people that do meet people off of Tinder as just a needs based thing. That's no different than what I went to Grinder for. I just think from the get go, it's like the
Just
thinking
real quick,
behind.
Ginger, just to let you know, we're kind of we've moved on from the subject of dating apps, and we're on to BDSM in cinema as a subject. So what I was talking about was I was just kind of relating the Christian Grey stuff, like the 50 Shades of Grey stuff, to real life encounters, and that like
Okay,
how
sorry.
yeah, it's fine. But I get your point though.
So there's some really great comments happening in the podcast text right now. So Saren writes contracts for BDSM to be able to spend time during the summer. Calls it seasonal whore contract, which is 2 to 6 months where both parties are upfront about expectations and a release of information. I have heard of this, like in BDSM, that they'll make like written contracts before engaging. I haven't seen that happen in cinema so much, unless it's covered in the 50 Shades of whatever. There's also some comments here. N6N66. Erotica isn't necessarily an example of what people actually want. It's escapism, especially in context of female sexuality. Women's sexuality in society is highly scrutinized. I'd agree with that. In erotica, like 50 Shades of Grey, the main character is passive and demure while all the sexy shit is happening. You can sort of insert and relax.
The fact that Christian Grey is so like overbearing and kind of almost rapey at points is that and why that dynamic is generally appealing to a lot of women in literature and even film is that that self insert doesn't, like, you don't have to feel. I don't know if feeling like you have to be an active sexual participant or active pursuer makes women feel bad about themselves, but it certainly, I guess, makes them feel less put upon in concept to have to, like, they just can sit back and be chased after, and while at the same time acting like a innocent white flower that they, I suppose, want themselves to be, or maybe, I don't know, or at least they like imagining themselves that way.
Well, let's bring it back full circle to the actual media. So, the Nymphomaniac films, for instance, I think the first one came out in 2013, somewhere in there. And it's like a pretty decent cast. People I didn't recognize before, but it looks like it was a really good film. So the plot is on a snowy evening, a middle-aged bachelor finds a self-diagnosed nymphomaniac beaten up and lying in an alleyway behind his apartment. He takes her back to his home and over tea listens intently as she recounts her story of her libidinous life. A highly educated but cloistered man connects and analyzes her stories with what he has read about. His favorite hobby is to read about fly fishing, which is why he has the fly fishing hook on the wall, and this is how their conversation begins. Throughout the story, he parallels much of what she has said and experienced with various methods of the sport of fly fishing.
The way that BDSM is portrayed in media is often to like these extremes that aren't really reflective of how the community honestly expresses itself, because it's always like this, it's just very much like this, like, okay, like 50 Shades, for example, is something that's really popular amongst at least the stories are really popular amongst like older women. And then when you watch the video, like the movies are marketed towards younger demographics, and the movies themselves are not really reflective of what BDSM is. It's more like this is a tale where I guess control is what's flirted with. But like if you go throughout BDSM communities, it's like, kink is something that's understood in a variety of ways. And um I don't know how to explain it really. It's just that it's communicated in a variety of ways that's not always like what you see in the movies, and it's not always like this very extreme thing. And oftentimes like the submissive role has the majority of the power. That makes sense.
We got a couple other good comments out here. We've got, so Susie was talking about Nymphomaniac is very iffy for me. She pretty much rants about her sexual encounters rather than involving actual BDSM. I would concur with that assessment. The only thing that might be remotely BDSM related or kink related is the train scene, as it might be seen as exhibitionism. So N666 or N6N66 quote, the movie was gross and the ending was grosser. What the fuck was the message? Was the question she asked herself after. Good question. Let's talk about Sleeping Beauty. Anyone here actually seen that movie? I have. And I
Yeah,
actually got a lot out of it. I thought it was really interesting, like the willingness to put yourself into someone else's hands while you're asleep, and the contracts that were written up beforehand were very fascinating.
like the idea of being able to not have any control or just like being unconscious, it irks me. So it was fascinating to watch that. Absolutely fascinating.
So we got a pitch from Danny here. It says the piano teacher is one of his favorite movies of all time, and it is BDSM center around a woman being the. I had no idea, Danny.
Now I have to watch that movie. Thank you
Right?
for the recommendation.
I'll have to see if I can track that one down. Anyone else here seen the Sleeping Beauty movie?
No, but it sounds interesting.
I originally watched it a few years ago. I think it came out in 2011, 2013, somewhere in there. It was on Netflix, and it was titillating, to say the least, because this very beautiful girl Let me grab the synopsis real quick. So, this promiscuous university student who works in an office by day and a restaurant by night, and occasionally as a research subject for a lab. She's paying tuition and rent and doing multiple jobs to pay for her expenses, and also caring for a sick relative who is very attracted to her. Well, that's interesting. She does not return his sexual interest, and his presence is the only time she's shown during the movie as smiling or laughing. An old joke between the two that he frequently asks Lucy, the main character, to marry him, and she always says no. Due to lack of money and his bad health, Lucy makes a decision to look for yet another part time job. She responds to a classified ad for a short term job, meets Clara, who runs a service that combines lingerie modeling and catering for black tie dinners, and Clara assures her that the men are not allowed to touch the women sexually, and Lucy agrees to it. Clara inspects Lucy's body and names her Sarah for the purpose of anonymity. At the dinner party, Lucy is the only girl dressed in white. The other women wear black lingerie that is much more revealing than Lucy's costume. So it's that kind of aesthetic of the virginal white is what they're shooting for, as she's a new employee. After one other session as a serving girl, she gets promoted. She receives a call from Clara's assistant for a different type of request, and she's driven to a country mansion where Clara offers Lucy as a new role wherein she will voluntarily be sedated and sleep naked while male clients lie beside her. They're permitted to caress and cuddle her, but no vaginal penetration is allowed. And so after she falls asleep and she's unconscious, the client is let in, and Clara reminds the man of the no penetration rule as he strips and curls up beside Lucy. Well, obviously, I don't want to give away the rest of the movie. Needless to say, it gets very, very interesting because through this job, she's able to afford a better apartment, better living situation, better clothing, and she's starting to make some real bank and just falling asleep and laying naked. Nana's pitching in here. So, Danny, does the piano teacher have a relationship with an older woman and a younger man? I'm guessing a student. I've watched this movie you are describing. Involve an older woman and a younger man, and were there any other BDSM type movies that anyone else has seen, like Chuck or Clover?
Not a BDSM movie, but a subject matter that is also very close to my heart, which is ethical non-monogamy. The movie was 5 to 7.
I'm guessing no on those. Here, hang on a second. Let me. All right. Well, Cantankerous, did you have any other suggestions for movies that we should talk about BDSM in?
I mean, there's movies like Eyes Wide Shut that have heavy dungeon-esque feel. I don't really know exactly why that was such a strong theme in that movie because it really didn't matter. But it was interesting, and the aesthetic was very appealing to me. So I enjoyed watching that.
It was all such a hazy dream. I swear I saw that years and years and years ago. I don't even remember much except for her literally being like exposed to like a vignette after vignette of sexuality that she herself had never experienced behind the anonymity of a mask.
Yeah, it's a very sexually appealing movie. I
Mhm.
don't know if it serves any purpose in the dialogue, but it's a way in which people are exposed to the idea or the proclivities or just massive orgies. I mean, why not, right?
Speaking of massive orgies, has anyone here been in an orgy?
Not at all.
I was invited to one, but that's about as far as I've ever gotten.
But you could have said, no shit, there I was, and I went to an orgy. And then this
The
happened.
closest thing was these two guys that went to Ivy League schools wanted to get with me, but it was literally the day that they wanted to get together was the day that I flew out to study abroad. So none of that worked out. And I forever hate myself for that. I was just like, this would have been the best time ever.
I think the best thing I've done was threesomes, and that was about as far as I would like to experience an orgy. But yeah, we'll see when that happens.
I gotcha. I too have only experienced threesomes. Girl, got well. Actually, uh, foursome, fivesome, foursome. Yeah, foursome. So 3 women, 1 man. I've never had more than one guy in a grouping. Sadly, he becomes the meat in every sandwich.
Yeah, I think mine were all women, and a man. I'd much prefer the dynamic. Usually tend to have straight men and bi-curious bisexual women around me more.
I seem to have this issue in kind of like my area because what I've found is that kind of in my area, there's not a whole bunch of bisexual guys. Most of them aren't even bi-curious. Most of them are straight as an arrow, which is unfortunate for me. Yeah, I just there's not a lot of people. There's not a massive BDSM community in my city, and if there is, I don't know about it. But yeah, so I feel kind of like not alone, but I feel pretty like I'm in the minority definitely. So I struggle to find people who are like down for that sort of stuff. Anyway, so
I feel like this is a good opportunity to kind of bring it back full circle with the whole dating apps and whatnot. Who here has used FetLife or Fetish Life? Okay, so those of you that are not in the know and would like to be, FetLife is exclusively like an online hookup dating events. All related to BDSM, and it's international. So Rockefeller, I would highly suggest you look up FetLife and create an
I'm
account.
already there.
And
I'm
yes,
already doing it right now.
Nana's even
Yeah,
like FetLife. That sounds fun. Yes, there are expos, there are classes, there are munches. There's ways to meet people. There's ways to like get into groups for various fetishes that you're interested or curious about. Also, it's an opportunity. There are like equipment like sales, and there are some events that are exclusive for like discounts at various BDSM and sex shops. So I highly recommend all of you check that out. FetLife is fantastic. Enough about that. I do want to pitch, since some of you are not aware of BDSM. If you're curious about where your own leanings may lie, I highly recommend you check out the BDSM test here on Suite 7A. It gives you an opportunity to kind of see where you are on the spectrum of things that you're interested in or curious about, or like hard no's. And you can explore that. I do believe we have a specific text channel for that here on the server. But yes, go ahead and take that test if you haven't. I highly recommend that you do so. And then you can learn a little bit more about yourself and share that with your community, who can learn a little bit more about you and see where your interests kind of intersect.